Sydney Harbour History Tour with charter vessel MV Salute. Welcome to Sydney, the Parramatta River and Port Jackson Bay. This documentary was filmed during June 2021. The intention of this film is to show our viewers Sydney Harbour and some of the amazing history within. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay our respects to their elders past and present. We're on board a Sydney charter vessel, MV Salute. She is a Randall 32 and is the perfect medium to showcase this beautiful city, which looks truly stunning from the water. We start near the Silverwater Bridge in Ermington, a western Sydney suburb towards Parramatta, where we'll make our way downstream past the iconic Opera House, Harbour Bridge and complete our journey at Bradley's Head Mossman. As we approach Newington Armoury on the right hand side of the Parramatta River, you can see the two remaining 3-tonne electric jib cranes from the former Royal Australian Navy depot. This depot was used for inspection, testing, storage and distribution of armaments during the First and Second World Wars. The area is now home to the Blaxland Riverside Family Park and the popular Armoury Wharf Cafe. Further down the river is 5 small buildings which form part of the Newington Armoury and the Powder Magazine. Superintendents would carry out their duties managing security and storage of armaments, including the large gun barrels, rounds, torpedoes, anti-aircraft missiles, mines, gunpowder and other explosives. There were up to 75 men working at the armoury at the peak of its operation. Ermington on the left played an early role in Australia's wine industry. In 1806, Gregory Blaxland established a vineyard here and produced award-winning wines. During March 1822, Australia's first wine export was shipped to England from Blaxland Vineyard. It was called Brush Farm. Here is the Ermington boat ramp, where residents, predominantly from northwestern Sydney, launch their boats and head off down the river to start their day fishing and home gazing. Melrose Park is the name of the large housing estate established here in 1937. It was named in honour of aviator Charles Melrose. He had a number of flying records and was the only solo flyer to finish the Melbourne Centenary Air Race in 1934. This area was once part of the suburb of Homebush Bay. However, the Auburn Council renamed the future waterfront residential precinct as a suburb of Wentworth Point in October 2009. It was then rezoned from industrial use to residential use in 2013. The Sydney Olympic Park Ferry Terminal and associated buildings situated within Wentworth Point have all been constructed within the last 8 years. Recently, this area has been surrounded with controversy when the Opal Tower building was hampered with poor construction which caused cracking and eventually the residents were forced to move out. On the flip side, there are plenty of modern apartments, cafes, restaurants and transport options which makes this area very livable. The bay beyond these modern buildings is Homebush Bay, located 16 kilometres from Sydney CBD and was used during the 1900s for industrial purposes. Just ahead is the John Whitton Railway Bridge, which carries the main northern trains across the Parramatta River, with the suburbs Rhodes on the right and Meadowbank on the left. It was originally built in September 1886, then refurbished in the year 2000. Both Rhodes and Meadowbank have recently seen a huge increase in residential high-rise construction and public transport infrastructure projects. The Ryde Bridge was opened on the 7th of December 1935. The centre section of the bridge originally rose to allow shipping to pass to the State Timber Yard on the northern side of the river, just west of this bridge. The lifting mechanism was removed in the late 20th century and has not opened since. The bridge carried a toll for 13 years until it was paid off in 1948. The new concrete bridge on the eastern side was completed in 1987. Before this bridge was built, a vehicular punt was in operation at the end of Blacksland Road. Kissing Point sounds really romantic. However, the origin of the name is not actually known. Many believe that the name comes from the early settler vessels making their way up the Parramatta River. They would kiss the bottom at this location, which marked the furthest point they could transit. Others believe that Governor Hunter may have kissed his partner in this location before carrying on his journey. Rocky Point on the right hand side houses the beautiful Rivendell School, which was originally completed on the 21st of September 1893 and was built as a convalescent hospital, which means a hospital for recovery after illness or surgery. Patients, including adults and children, would be transported here from many of the Sydney hospitals for recuperation. In 1999, this building underwent an extensive restoration and became the school you see before you. On the 5th of February 1788, Breakfast Point was named when Captain John Hunter, who later became Governor of New South Wales, had breakfast with Wangal clan elders whilst exploring the river. Then, in 1883, the Mortlake Gas Company operated here for just over 100 years, when eventually the area was subdivided and modern develops have continued until the present day.
Divers will be in the water at 0900 hours through till 1700 today. Over.
Trias, message received, timing operations within the work zone at Blackwattle Bay, 0900 to 1700. Do you require a no wash zone? Over.
Negative on the no wash zone, BTS. We're all good here in the fish markets. It's pretty tight down here.
Trias, all understood. Perfect. Thank you, sir.
David Anderson, a private soldier in the New South Wales Army Corps, was granted land here at Cabarita in 1795. Cabarita is an Aboriginal word which means by the water. In the past, the suburb has consisted of industrial works including the Bushell's Coffee and Tea Factory. However, housing developments have replaced the commercial buildings of yesteryear.
Well, Mike, 1-0, please.
Bedlam Point next to Banjo Patterson's cottage and Abbotsford on the southern side of the river marked the crossing location of the original Great Northern Road. This location was chosen because of the narrow gap across the river. In 1834, a ferry called the Bedlam Ferry was introduced and operated by convict labour and was capable of carrying one horse and cart plus a few passengers. Abbotsford was originally named Biggie Biggie by the Aboriginal Wangal clan. European settler Arthur Renwick, who owned the estate here, named this location Abbotsford after the Abbotsford House in the United Kingdom. This tiny bay on the Parramatta River, Lookingglass Bay, is classified as a bird sanctuary. It was given its name when Governor Phillip and Lieutenant Bradley made an early expedition up the river in February 1788. The party stopped here and the Governor gave an Aboriginal man a hatchet and a looking-glass. In his diary, Bradley commented that the Aboriginal quickly conceptualised the notion of reflection by comparing the mirror with his reflection in the water. Banjo Patterson's cottage, originally named Rock End, was purchased by Banjo's grandmother in 1874. Banjo became a famous poet, and this location provided much of his inspiration. In 1979, local residents fought against the demolition of this historical cottage after approval for a home unit development was granted. Because of its historical importance, the cottage stands today, and in 1981 was renovated into a restaurant, which is now often used for wedding receptions. Abbotsford House was built in 1878 at a cost of £11,000. Sir Arthur Renwick, a medical practitioner and businessman, emigrated to Australia with his parents in 1841, serving as a member of the New South Wales Parliament, and was the first president of the New South Wales Medical Board. In 1904, Renwick was forced to sell his property in the area after suffering financial loss. The property was subdivided and sold by auction in 1905. In 1917, the property was sold to Nestle, and the site was purchased to build the largest chocolate factory in the Southern Hemisphere. Abbotsford House was used for the offices, and the factory was built on three sides of the home. The suburb Chiswick was originally part of the Five Dock Farm. It is located 9 kilometres west of the Sydney CBD. In the 1850s, a Dr. Fortescue owned an estate in the area which he named Chiswick, after the village of Thames west of London. From 1884 until 1998, there was a wire mill on the waterfront. At the peak of its operations, the wire mill was processing 35,000 tonnes of steel annually and employed around 1,300 men. More recently, it has been subjected to an increase in the building of many modern apartment blocks, which has seen the population rise to around 2,400. How Five Dock Bay got its name is not clear. However, many historians believe the name came from these 5 docks, located at the northeastern corner of the bay. To provide better access to Sydney, a wharf was erected in 1881 at Gladesville, and a 2-lane steel-girded bridge was built across the river between Drummoyne and Huntleys Point. Remnants of the sandstone abutments of the original bridge still exist on the riverbanks. This bridge carried a tram line and road traffic, but did not accommodate pedestrians. The current Gladesville Bridge, completed on the 2nd of October 1964, was the largest single-span concrete bridge on the planet, with a height of 61 metres, as it was anticipated that extremely large vessels would need to pass through this location. The design was considered very innovative, daring and untried. This bridge is a heritage-listed concrete arch and was constructed to form part of the North Western Expressway. It crosses the Parramatta River between Drummoyne and Hunters Hill. Hunters Hill settled in 1835 and was named after John Hunter, the 2nd Governor of New South Wales. One of the earliest settlers was Mary Roby, the first female retailer in Sydney. She built a cottage, later known as Fig Tree House, on the land that fronted the Lane Cove River. In Hunters Hill you'll find the famous Deckhouse restaurant, which is another popular wedding venue. William Wright moved to Australia with his wife in 1838. The successful merchant and whaler bought land in the northern part of this area in 1853 and built Drummoyne House in the Georgian classical style. He named the area after Drummoyne on the River Clyde in Scotland. Unfortunately, Drummoyne House became tired and was demolished in 1971 to make way for modern homes and units. Spectacle Island is the oldest naval explosives manufacturing and storage complex in Australia. Commencing operations in 1865, it was originally built to store government gunpowder, but in 1893 was converted to store naval munitions. The island was initially much smaller, but was significantly increased in size with the use of waste from the nearby Balmain colliery. Today, Spectacle Island is a depository of naval heritage items and one of the many Royal Australian Navy training sites. This island is not open to the public and is constantly monitored by 24/7 security surveillance. Cockatoo Island is a history extravaganza. We can trawl through the many layers on this 44-acre World Heritage Site. In 1839, Cockatoo Island was chosen as the site of a new penal establishment by the Governor-General Sir George Gipps. The prisoners were employed to construct their barracks, storage facilities for grain supplies, and Australia's first shipyard dry dock. The prisoners also quarried the stone for construction projects around Sydney, including a seawall for Circular Quay. Then, in 1870, shipbuilding began on Cockatoo Island, and to this day you can still see the large manufacturing equipment inside the many buildings. At its peak during World War I, Cockatoo Island was home to over 4,000 shipbuilders and could accommodate ships up to 20,000 tonnes. In 1933, the island was leased to the Cockatoo Docks and Engineering Company, who held the lease for just over 60 years. Now, the island is managed by the Sydney Harbour Federation Trust and is home to 2 cafes, boat storage and maintenance facilities, camping and hotel accommodation, history and ghost tours, plus many other exhibitions, concerts and events. You can see HMAS Ovens. She was an Oberon-class submarine of the Royal Australian Navy and was one of 6 built in Scotland and entered service in 1969. In this photo taken April 1990, she's docked here at Cockatoo Island. Dawn Fraser Pool, originally named the Balmain Swimming Club, is a complete swimming complex extending back to the turn of the century. It's an excellent example of pool architecture no longer practiced, and a well-known Sydney landmark set in an attractive harbourside location. In 1880, the Balmain Council acquired the land and commissioned the public baths. Then, in 1902, the original enclosure was replaced and enlarged in 1924. In June 2000, the pool was listed on the New South Wales Heritage Register. Unfortunately, this complex is currently closed to the public. The Birchgrove suburb was named after Birchgrove House, built by Lieutenant John Birch, paymaster of the 73rd Regiment. Around 1812 he added Grove to his surname when naming the home, because of the large number of orange trees growing on the original site. From the 1860s, a number of waterfront businesses appeared in the area, including Cooper's Boat Builders and the Morrison and Sinclair Shipyard. In 1900, the Birchgrove House grounds were subdivided into 12 lots. The home was eventually demolished in 1967 to make way for some units. Between 1897 and 1931, the Balmain Colliery operated here, and approximately 2,600 feet in depth was the deepest coal mine to have ever operated in Australia. Today this area is governed by the Inner West Council and is under pressure from wealthy occupants looking to modernise their homes. The council are doing their best to preserve the heritage and character of this area. Snails Bay and the concrete dolphins reassure us that Sydney Harbour is still a working harbour, with storage of commercial marine wharfs and vessels in this location. Goat Island lies off the suburbs of Balmain and Millers Point, and at the junction of Darling Harbour. The island is a former gunpowder storage, arsenal, shipyard, powder magazine, maintenance facility, accommodation, and now interpretation centre and education facility. Over the years, Goat Island has served as a quarry, convict stockade, explosive store, police station, fire station, boatyard, and even a film set. Today the island forms part of the Sydney Harbour National Park. Mort Bay in the suburb of Balmain is the home of many of the government-owned Sydney Harbour ferries, including the famous freshwater class Manly Ferry. Waterview Wharf Workshops is a heritage-listed former shipping company. It was built from 1880 to 1941. It was known as the Adelaide Steamship Company Wharf and the Burns Timber Yard. Currently these buildings are occupied as offices for 23 small businesses. Darling Harbour was originally known as Long Cove, but was generally referred to as Cockle Bay until 1826, when Governor Darling renamed it after himself. It was originally part of the commercial port of Sydney, including the Darling Harbour Railway goods yard. During the Great Depression, the eastern part of Darling Harbour, Barangaroo, became known as the Hungry Mile, a reference to the waterside workers searching for jobs along the wharves. Barangaroo Reserve is a 15-acre recreated park at the northern end of Darling Harbour. The park opened just 6 years ago in August 2015 and features a reconstructed, naturalistic headland based around the pre-1836 shoreline. The original headland of foreshore was cut away to make space for the wharves as Sydney became a major international port. This new public space is inspired by what existed before 1836 and restores the relationship with other headlands in Sydney Harbour. Walsh Bay was named after Henry Walsh, an engineer-in-chief of the Sydney Harbour Trust. The wharfs were constructed during the period 1912 to 1921 and were used for merchants of the day, but also provided resident accommodation including 2 hotels. Constant maintenance and renovation work ensures these buildings survive the test of time. Currently this area is occupied by the Pier 1 Hotel, Sydney Dance Company, private apartments and many hidden cafes. This area feels like an undiscovered secret in the heart of Sydney. Settlement on the north shore of the harbour was quite limited. One of the first settlers was James Milson, who lived in the vicinity of Jeffrey Street in Kirribilli, directly opposite Sydney Cove. The north shore was more rugged than the southern side, and western areas of the harbour had limited agricultural potential. The early activities in the area included tree felling, boat building and some orchard farming in the limited areas of good soil. The North Shore Railway line was built in the 1890s. Currently, a number of international companies have their Australian or Asia Pacific headquarters in this part of Sydney. This angle provides an appreciation of the surprisingly large size of North Sydney. After completion of the Sydney Harbour Bridge, Luna Park began construction in 1935. It was then closed in mid-1979 following the Ghost Train fire, which killed 6 children and 1 adult. Most of the park was then demolished, and a new amusement park was constructed. The park was closed again in 1988 as an independent engineering inspection determined that several rides needed urgent repair. Reopening in 2004 and under a new government legislation, the park looks to have a bright future as 9 new rides were recently added. The Sydney Harbour Bridge abutments at the base of the pylons are essential to support the loads from the arch and hold its spans firmly in place, but the stone pylons themselves have no structural purpose. They were included to provide a frame for the arch panels and to give better visual balance to the bridge. The stone for these columns was transported from Moiruga, 300 miles south of Sydney, where they were quarried 18,000 cubic metres of granite. A creeper crane was also employed on each side of the bridge to hoist men and materials into position. The weight of the steel alone is 39,000 tonnes and is held together with 8 million rivets. The first people to occupy the area now known as Sydney were the Aboriginal people. Radiocarbon dating suggests that they lived in and around Sydney for at least 30,000 years. Sydney Cove, on which Circular Quay is located, is the site of the initial landing of the First Fleet on the 26th of January 1788, 233 years ago. Circular Quay now comprises a mixture of historical and modern buildings and is a transport core for Greater Sydney. It's highly recommended that any visitor takes a trip from here to Manly on the freshwater class ferry for lunch in one of the many seaside restaurants. The Sydney Opera House is one of the world's most famous and distinctive buildings. Designed by Danish architect John Judson, the building commenced construction at Bennelong Point in 1958. Problems throughout the construction included budget blowouts, engineering faults and rebuilds, programming and arguments within the construction team and council. The project was officially opened 10 years late on the 20th of October 1973. These problems seem far behind us now, and the multi-performance venue hosts over 1,500 shows annually, attended by more than 1.2 million people. The Opera House is almost always open to the public and hosts regular guided tours. Bennelong Point was originally a small tidal island. Then, in December 1798, a half-moon battery was constructed at the northern end, mounted with guns from HMS Supply. Then, during the period 1818 to 1821, the tidal area between Bennelong Island and the mainland was filled with rocks. The entire area was levelled to create a low platform for the construction of Fort Macquarie, shown in this photo. The Sydney Royal Botanic Gardens is a 74-acre public recreation area surrounding Farm Cove. Opened in 1816, is one of the most important botanical institutions in the world. The garden is open every day of the year and entry is free. At the northern end is the famous Lady Macquarie's chair, which was carved from stone for Governor Lachlan Macquarie's wife. She would sit here and observe the activities on the harbour and specifically watch for sailing ships coming from Great Britain. Fort Denison, formerly known as Pinchgut Island, was initially used to hold prisoners. Then, in 1839, 2 American warships entered the harbour at night circling the island. Concerned with the threat of foreign attack, the island was converted into a fortress, which was completed in 1847. Much later, in 1942, 3 Japanese submarines entered the harbour. When the US Navy cruiser Chicago fired on the Japanese, some of the shells hit this island, causing some minor damage. Now you can see a new ferry wharf currently under construction, and when completed will pave the way for new restaurant, bar and history tours. Garden Island is home to the Royal Australian Navy and includes an active dockyard, naval wharves and naval heritage and museum precinct. This area is home port to almost half of the major Australian fleet. The skyline of the Sydney CBD is a myriad of concentrated skyscrapers, symmetrically placed to create this beautiful city. The Sydney Tower opened in September 1981 and is the second tallest observation tower in the Southern Hemisphere. While AMP managed the Centre Point shopping centre, the tower is officially referred to as AMP Tower. However, after the Westfield Group took over ownership in December 2001, the name was changed to Sydney Tower. The shopping centre below was renovated heavily in 2009 and is one of Sydney's most exclusive shopping centres. The first European activity in the eastern suburbs took place not long after settlement, when a makeshift signalling station was set up on the ridge overlooking the ocean. Its role was to signal if a ship was approaching. Pilots then based at Camp Cove could meet the ship and guide it through the harbour. Several defence fortifications are located on the shores and cliff tops of Vaucluse. They were intended to defend the town of Sydney from bombardment by an enemy vessel standing off the coast. Some of the fortifications are still intact and lie adjacent to the signal station. Here you can see the Sydney CBD, Opera House, Harbour Bridge, North Sydney, yachts and power boats enjoying their day out on the water, in an ever-changing view as we move around Sydney Harbour. Bradley's Head is named after First Fleet Naval Officer William Bradley. Today it is often used for wedding ceremonies and photographs. The Navy mast at this location is from HMAS Sydney and is a monument for all Australian ships and sailors lost in battle.